Welcome to the Korea Society. It is so great to see many new faces. If this is your first time visiting the Korea Society, welcome, and to our old friends, welcome back. This program is also being live webcasted, so I would like to welcome everybody who is joining us online. Make sure you subscribe to the emails from the Korea Society and follow us on social media and YouTube so that you don't miss any other programs. Now, tonight, we are thrilled to welcome Hyeseung Song, who is here to talk about her extraordinary debut memoir, Docile, Memoir of a Not-So-Perfect Asian Girl.
Oh, yeah, I got you. Thank you.
And joining Hyeseung on the stage is Emma Eun-joo Choi, a writer, a comic, and a producer, writer, social media head, and New York City correspondent at NPR's Wait, Don't Tell Me.
Woo! Yes.
Docile is available for sale everywhere books are sold, but you can also purchase your own copy here tonight, thanks to You and Me Books. Hyeseung will sign copies later on. And you can also ask your own questions to Hyeseung later in the program. If you're joining us online, please send your questions to artsandculture@koreasociety.org. And without much further ado, please welcome Hyeseung Song and Emma Choi.
Thank you.
Hyeseung, congratulations.
Thank you, and thank you so much for being here, everybody, to the Korea Society, Simon Schuster, to You and Me Books. This is amazing. What a turnout.
Yeah, what a great space. Are you excited? It's your debut novel. It just came out.
Yes, I'm excited about my debut memoir. I am already thinking about the next thing, but it's wonderful to be here and be celebrating this.
Relax, girl.
I know. I mean, I started writing what would become Docile when I was in college, when I was 20 or 21, and so it's been a long time, a long fruition to come to this point. I'm 46 now, so yeah, it's awesome.
Keeping it tight.
Yeah.
Right? Awesome.
Yeah, don't give up.
Okay. Well, why don't we start? You're going to read a section from the very beginning of your book.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll set it up. This is when I am really young, living in Sugarland, which is a suburb outside of Houston. And my parents, my Amma and my Appa, have just had a fight, and I am with my mother. I scanned the range of destruction in a long panorama. From the kitchen where, incongruously, the pattern of quiet tulips glowed subtly across the wallpaper, a thin column of light passed over the threshold into the dining room, and everything was illuminated. The smashed Corelle plates, the bright red juices of the Korean food bleeding into the downy white of the carpet like 1,000 small wounds, the chair overturned on its side, looking dead and given up. From this spot on the floor, I thought about the world, how you are supposed to build things, not tear them down, and how when one person breaks something, a different person might stay to clean it up. Whom do you help but the person who stays to clean up? I turned around and saw Amma sitting on the floor against the wall. She wept, holding her head in her beautiful hands. I moved toward her, placing my body next to hers, laying my hand over hers. Embrace her, I thought. Cling to her, I thought. From inside the prison of her existence, she looked far away into the nothingness now. From across this distance, I called to her, Amma, and willed her to hear me. I am magic. I have all the power in the universe inside of me, and I am magic, I told myself. And my mother, the tired and ancient Sibyl in a cage, said, I want to die. I sobbed harder then, hearing her reply, and I shook her hand with my hand, saying no. This woman had taught me that love was an obedience, and the guilt inside of me pricked hard that I'd wanted to run away and leave her behind. In the half-shorn cane fields of Sugarland, there was a house, a new house built from dreams. Inside, there were broken people, and dreams were not being built, but being torn down. I bowed under the immense darkness of my mother's psyche. Hyeseung, don't be like me when you grow up, she said. What would be so bad about being like her one day? What would be so bad about being kind and generous in the face of lack and clever in everything? But I knew what she meant. Where was the key to her prison? I wanted to scream at the universe. Had I had it but lost it? If so, I must have been bad. I hugged my mother to my body, and through my skin leached the sadness out from hers, and ate and ate and ate her sadness away with my life.
Beautiful. So I just want to start and say this story is so personal. Obviously, it's a memoir. And you write so beautifully. And I was so surprised after I read it to find that this is your debut book,
Yes.
and you are a visual artist, you're a painter.
Yes.
So what is it about memoir you think that the story needed to be told as a memoir?
Yeah, I absolutely felt compelled. There was a compulsion. I said already that I had started writing when I was 20. I was just inchoate doodlings on paper. When I was in college in the creative writing department at Princeton, you could either be a poet or you could be a fiction writer. There was no creative nonfiction, there was no memoir, there was no essays. So of course I applied to take these workshops in prose and fiction. And as I wrote, I just kept thinking, I'm writing about the most annoying people in the world. That's all. I just trying to understand them, my family. And they were so maddening to me. And I was trying to understand. I was curious and compelled. And at first, I didn't know if I was writing sort of like, the term autofiction had not yet been created, invented. And so I was just writing, and I never thought about writing this cloaked as anything else but my own story. I don't know. This is day 2, day 3 of it out there in the world, so there might be consequences and I might have regrets, but that's where I started and that's where I ended.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Different question, not as important, but I have to ask. So you change names, right? That's not their real names in the book. But then how do you choose the new name? You're like, that's the same flavor of name?
Yeah, totally. You're going for the flavor.
Okay,
Yeah. Like,
okay.
is it as delicious as their other name? You know? Yeah. And I think the only person whose name was not changed, I think, was my mother and my sister. My sister didn't mind to be Sarah. She's Sarah now. But yeah, it was fun to figure out the names for sure.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, your book has been out here for about 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
And I write fiction, and when I think about people knowing about my life out there, at least I have the shield of like, that's not my story.
Right.
But now, like, tons of strangers know so much about the intimate details of your life.
Yes.
Like, what does that feel like?
It feels incredible, but also like a friend of mine. Well, first of all, I think I woke up on Wednesday morning. The book had come out on Tuesday. Wednesday morning to several texts from friends who were like, I stayed up all night to read your book, which was so incredible to hear. But I think a friend of mine was also like, I feel like this is a huge invasion of your privacy to know what is going on in your head at the times that I knew you. And then I've had a lot of reactions, and I remember speaking to another journalist who brought up Roxane Gay and how Roxane doesn't really love hearing people's reaction about her essays because she's not a therapist. She is just a person who wrote these truthful things. But then, of course, there's someone on the other side that she's speaking with, someone on the other side that I'm speaking with. And it's been a lot. It's like a both and type of situation where I'm so excited to hear what people have to say, but it's also like, I think in our culture, artists are considered vessels for people's reactions. Like, we're supposed to take it all in, and I don't know yet. 48 hours in, I don't know yet how I feel about that.
Yeah, when you're writing, or when you wrote this, what do you think about who you're writing to? Is there a person? Is there some kind of perspective there?
There was a long time I didn't think of the reader. I think that's probably true for a lot of writers. Like when you start trying to figure out what you're saying on paper, on the screen, or whatever, like you're not thinking about who you're speaking with. It comes much later. There was a time period when I was writing the book when the structure was really eluding me. About 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you saw more and more memoirs that were experimental structures, like hybrid memoirs or memoirs and essays, or memoirs that have a lot of literary criticism in them. And the first iteration of Docile was a memoir that was like that. It was very experimental in structure. And then I knew that it wasn't working. Something about it. It was like the structure was self-imposed, and the story, I didn't really understand the story so well yet to have it decide and tell me what the structure was going to be. So, I put the manuscript aside. Life took its turn. It provided me more fodder. I saw exactly, and the thing that was the really big turning point was my mother passing away, and that clicked everything into place for me. And then I revised. And when I was revising the structure, then I started thinking more about the reader, who is on the other end of this. Like, because I always knew I wanted it out there in the world. And I always tell my friend, any room that I walk into, I am always the luckiest person. That's always just the case. Like, if you read my book could be Docile, Memoirs of the Luckiest Girl in the Room. Like, every place where I am struggling, someone reaches out to me and gives me their hand and helps me, and I survive through no merit of my own, but luck through other people. And whether it's like my college roommate, Joanna, or my wonderful, brilliant psychiatrist who was able to deploy culturally competent mental health care for me. I'm always the luckiest person in the room. So I think basically, I lost my train of thought a little bit. What was I saying?
I loved it. Yeah.
You did? Yeah, I think the structure, I ended up having to rewrite this whole book, and then thinking about the audience after that, and realizing that the person that I was hoping to reach is a person who doesn't feel as lucky as me.
Mm-hmm.
The person who, is struggling or doesn't feel like there's anyone out there who can understand. So that is really I guess the ideal reader is the person who finds some solace or some help or some message that is assisted to them from this book. And that sounds a little bit hubristic to say that, like, oh, I want to be like this person who's really helping other people. But that is really my hope. That is really like the ambition of this book.
Yeah, I don't think it's hubristic. I think it's great. I mean, okay, going back to something you said earlier, did you give your therapist this book?
No, I didn't. But I did send it to one of my old psychiatrists.
Yeah? Did she fact check it?
She didn't fact check it, but I am writing a second book right now, and I did basically asked for all my medical records so I could like see the timeline, and I'm like, yes, I'm like a journalist here of my own life. So I did do that for that.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I want to go back to structure for a second.
Yeah.
I don't think this is a spoiler. It's just what the book is. But the book, I was really fascinated. First of all, it moves so quick. You have very short chapters. You speed right along, yes. Right? Like my mom, who's one of the slowest readers out there, read it in like 2 days. Shout out to my mom.
Total shout out to your mother.
And I was thinking about, like, there's certain moments, like towards the end of the book, you start zooming. Like, you start going through moments and you don't linger. And I'm wondering what the impetus was behind that. Are you writing it like it felt? Or are you writing it for the audience to keep moving?
So it's an amazing question. I think really the original structure of the book was me trying so hard all of these different kind of mini quests to fix myself. But it felt like ta-dum, 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 right? Yeah. And then like I said, when my mother passed away, I saw a very, very strong thread, this very strong arc, and almost a denouement. So I knew that this book has to feel like a novel. It has to have a novelistic structure. And the reason why the story was calling for that is because really for me, I was always, number one, curious about my life through like some kind of investigative procedure. I was discovering, I became a philosophy major literally because I was like, this is the best thing that can teach me how to be in the world. I mean, something so earnest that only a 20 or 21-year-old would try to do, like learn from the classroom, right?
Yeah.
How to live one's life. So I ended up going out there and revising the book. And the book, I'm so pleased because I think the experience of living this life was also propulsive. So why not have that feeling of discovery, curiosity, investigative, propulsion be like in the actual structure of the book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. On that note, do you want to read another passage at the end of the book? It might be fun to talk about it
Yeah.
as an arc. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. This is actually the last 2 pages of the book, and yeah, it's definitely not a giveaway, but there's a lot of themes that come together at the end, and you'll see sort of how I tried different things in the world in order to get to the right place. And this is where I'm about 34, 35 here, and I'm in New York, and I'm an artist. I still felt the most comfortable and seen when I was uncategorizable, when I deflected labels and saw myself as made up of many aspects, like a shiny mosaic, visible to some people at one angle and to others at another, when no one but me could calculate my worth. Whenever I was at a loss in the studio, I cleared the easel and made a self-portrait. There were so many I painted. Me with a blood-red horizon in the background. Me in a small square, defiant. At some point in the course of making the portrait, I looked into the mirror so long, I could no longer recognize the genetics, history, culture, and place that made me me. I was simply lines and shapes, light and darkness like anyone else. The human categorizations fell away, jawline sneakily square. The eyes the writers of so many books have lazily described as almond-shaped, though they look nothing like the nut. The black hair that once a girl in Texas asked to touch to see how dry and coarse. And for a second, my fundamental self, the thing that didn't need things and existed already full and whole inside, came into focus. Happiness needs a quest, and in that quest to become visible and matter to others, I had lost appearing and mattering to myself. In my life, I had tried to be a great daughter, a great student, a great wife, an American, a Korean, even a great artist. And through these pursuits, I had always chased an ought, forgetting to revel in what I actually already was.
And so I was wondering, the book ends around when you're 35,
Yeah.
30-ish.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of life has happened to you since then, too.
Sure.
So how do you decide where to put the bookends on this narrative?
Sorry, that was unprofessional. That was such a good question. A friend of mine asked me that question. She's like, why didn't you just end after you had your first big solo show as an artist in New York City? Or why didn't you, end like right before your mom dies? Or, she had all of these interesting questions too about where I could have toggled the bookend. And, the book is a lot about racial identity, about getting an identity outside what we call the model minority myth, this idea that all Asian Americans are docile, STEM excelling, tryhards who can be counted on to maintain the status quo. The model minority myth is also a construct that is all about you have to be a certain way, i.e. Model, in order to earn certain things, money, visibility, legitimacy, and acceptance in our culture, in order to deserve things that are basic fundamental human rights, like food, shelter, water, love, dignity, whatever, and really I was trying to figure out, like, what's the answer, what's the breakdown, what's the implosion, explosion of that idea of the model minority myth, because it plays into so many parts of this book, like this idea of the poverty math that, like, my mother, she used to drive in Houston, and I would sit with my brother in the car, and my mother would be accounting and calculating, this is the rent, this is the car payment, this is the insurance, this is the health insurance, this is the, and I remember as a child, I was so attuned to the calculation and hoping my mom would, like, be able to win at the end of her calculation. And then as I grew older, I grew wearisome to this poverty math, this idea of, like, scarcity. And it was my brother who was able to tune into it more. And I think, my father came to America to have such a big financial, huge, dream of becoming not just a little bit wealthy, but uber wealthy. And I think, we laugh, but it's like the poverty math, the opposite of the poverty math is always, this idea of abundance. And, like, the model minority myth, you always have this idea of scarcity. If resources are scarce, then you have to go towards abundance. You have to, like, achieve more and love more and do all these things more and more and more. But the math is not mathing. You're not really, trying to get to a point of, like, more infinite resources. You have to break up the idea of the model minority myth and step out of the idea of mathing altogether and say, no matter what I do or how little I do, I still am enough. Mm-hmm. And it's not really about scarcity or abundance, it's about enoughness. And that was what I wanted to make sure I got to that point of, I knew in my life that I was enough no matter what I did. Mm-hmm. And so that was really the bookend. That was the end of Docile. Was not like if I had married my, husband who was the astrophysicist, or if I had achieved this other thing, this other external thing, like having a big show in New York City. It had to be where I lost everything. I had no husband, no financial stability, no mental health, nothing. I had to have nothing in order for me to realize I am enough.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to talk about the model minority myth thing, because I wonder, it was funny reading it, because your childhood, there are details in there, and we're probably like half a generation apart, and there's some details in your childhood are like the same as my childhood, which is depressing. But we were talking about this backstage, like things have changed so much for how Koreans and young Korean people get treated now.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Like, I wonder, like, as someone who thinks a lot about how you're perceived, how you're treated, like, what do you think about what's happening now?
Hallyu and this wave, Korean wave, is hugely important, and we are now exporters of culture. Korea's exporters of culture to the rest of the world. It's fabulous. But anytime I go visit Princeton, it's my alma mater, I am absolutely flabbergasted. The mental health struggles of the students on that campus are doing and feeling and behaving exactly the same way as I did in 1996 when I was there. Mm-hmm. So the more things change, the more things stay the same, for sure. And I don't know what to say about that, except for the one, I think, bright spot, the one silver lining to something like what's going on, this AAPI suicides that are at on the college level, especially at places like Princeton, is that after the pandemic, anti-AAPI violence or during the pandemic, we had anti-AAPI violence, but your generation, I think, my generation, I was afraid. Jean, I was afraid of you when we were at Princeton, I didn't want to go towards her, even though she was like, why wouldn't I? She's the most beautiful person. Like, why wouldn't I? Because I was afraid. But I think your generation is not afraid to go towards, instead of like holding on to my tokenism and holding on to my identity of individualism and singularity, which is just a myth, it's not real. The next generation is going towards each other to celebrate and ignite collaborative joy, collective advocacy, collective power. I mean, can you imagine, like, my generation? We didn't know each other's lives. We didn't know our own heritage because we were afraid to go towards each other. I have a friend who, she calls it bageling. She's Jewish, and she's like, anytime I go into a room, I see another Jew, we bagel at each other. It's like, she see each other, and we're like, you're a Jew, and they bagel.
Yeah.
And she calls it the phenomenon called bageling. And I didn't kimchi with anyone.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That's so funny. I was just talking about this with my partner because I feel like when it's a room of mostly white people and there's like 2 Koreans, there's like maybe 10 minutes before we start kimchi and talk about Korean food, you know?
Totally.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Well, another facet of the model minority thing is that you're an artist,
Yes.
which is stereotypically not what Asians want their kids to be, right? And yeah.
Oh, I have so much to say about that.
Okay, well, let me get to my question.
Totally.
Okay. This is more of a craft question. Sorry, but my question is like, your artwork is so beautiful, and the passage you just read describes, self-portraiture as a tool. Like, Frida Kahlo like looked at the mirror and processed what was happening through her self-image, right? And a memoir is a self-portrait, right?
Totally.
There.
Oh,
A+.
I got kimchi.
Yeah,
Right.
I want you to grade me after this.
You're doing a great job.
But and I'm wondering, and if anyone hasn't seen Hyeseung's artwork, please do. And personally, I think seeing your artwork after reading this made so much sense to me. But to you, how do you see these forms intersecting, responding to each other in your life? Like, do you think you paint like how you write?
Okay, 2 points. These are such good questions. My first point about this is I mean, the book is like this triangulation of things: racial identity, mental health, and the redemptive power of art. I never felt, sorry, Dad, I love you, but I never felt like unconditionally loved when I was growing up in my family. My essential nature, my essential power as a person, the way that I saw myself and could accept myself, that enoughness, I felt that open and bloom through art. It was like when I was a child drawing or when I was writing. So art was the place that I could love myself totally fine. And that's the cool thing about that, is that like all of us have times where it's hard for us to feel unconditionally accepted by like our primary relationships, our primary people. And so it's funny, you can find other experiences in life that like provide that. Second point is, when I was 25, I went to art school. And when I got to art school, then I felt so behind because I had just left Harvard Law School and Harvard Graduate School. Everybody there at art school was a lot, not a lot younger than me, but when you're 25 and someone's like 19, it feels like, oh, I'm so behind, right? But then anyways, like I spent this kind of really intense period of 3 years in one room with all these other young artists, basically working on chiaroscuro setups, like light and dark setups, and painting from life and drawing from life. My brain, it was like so imprinted by that experience that my eye was already trained through hypervigilance, through like assimilation, to like look at other people and also always orient around other people, because I was not the majority representative of the majority culture. I think that served me in painting and in drawing, because I understood nuance and subtlety. I understood what was going on. My eye was super trained. But the power of my experience was that hypervigilance and all that trauma that trained my eye was able to like lift myself and lift my own self up in a way that was actually really healthy for me. So yeah, I mean, I guess that's coming back to my first point of like art was really redemptive for me. It was my place where I felt most whole and most myself.
Yeah. Does writing make you feel like that too?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think it uses the same part of your brain?
Definitely not.
Yeah.
Definitely not. Yeah. I think with my artwork, I mean, I think a lot of people have asked this question too, and I don't have like a really good canned or pat answer about it. It's like when I wrote, like I only have this to show for myself, it's like 26 years of toiling away at this story. I'm very proud of it. I hope everybody reads it, of course. But ultimately, the practice of my artwork and making this are so different. Like I remember, the artwork, the paintings that I made when I was younger are just, I can't even look at them because I'm like, oh my God. So I'm sure I'll get to a point maybe when I'm 60 or 70, like I look at Docile and I'm like, oh my God. But we'll see. I'll let you know. I'll call you then.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, this may be another dumb question, but is this your artwork on the cover?
It's not. And like some people ask me, is that you? And I cannot rock those bangs. So no.
I think you could.
Oh.
But we can talk about that later.
My mother would say, you don't have the face shape for me, but.
No, we got those big old heads.
We got those big old heads, yes.
Yeah. Anyways, that's a question I asked. Oh, okay. Another question. Do you read while you write?
Yes.
And what were you reading during Docile? I mean, 26 years.
26 years.
Yeah.
I was reading a lot of books.
Okay, let me modify the question. What do you think most influenced Docile?
Which I think is not the same question of what is your favorite book, but kind of is, I feel like. I read a lot of novels. It wasn't until much later that I started writing or reading memoirs. Like Hannah and Albert are here. We went through a huge journey to get these blurbs, which are like basically advanced praise from other like amazing authors who are touting your book, and read an early copy. And I read so many memoirs, and I was like so, again, lucky and blessed in the room to get the blurbs that I did from the authors that agreed to read Docile. And I think the memoirs, that was really great to read a lot of memoirs, especially, as I said, in the back room, that there's a very developed memoir tree in America now, and there's a very flourishing memoir branch of Korean American memoirs, people like Hyeseung Song and Margaret Choi Lee. But I think when I was writing this book, I was really reading more novels and fiction. And I think that is really reflected in sort of what I hope is the page-turnery aspect of Docile. Yeah. I just want it. Yeah, that's what I want.
And you did it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, something you were saying earlier, it reminded me of like, you read from the end of the book, right? Mm-hmm. And something people talk about a lot is spoilers, right? Yeah. But it's your life,
yeah.
Right?
So, I mean, I am alive. I survived.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It'd be crazy if this was a hologram of you.
Yeah, it's like
it's not. But like, are you ever like nervous to talk to people in case you get a spoiler about your book by just talking about your life?
You mean like they're on page 50 and I'm like, I just want you to know, like, I'm living at page 2000 or something like that. Like,
or something like that. I just think it's funny because people are like, don't tell me what happens at the end.
oh, I
right?
see,
But then,
yeah.
you know, every time you share something about your life, it's
Right,
it's
right.
like, oh, it's still the part where you might kill yourself.
I promise, I promise there's still so many cliffhangers for you guys, so don't worry.
Yeah.
I haven't spoiled everything today.
Great. Well, on that note, I think we're going to open up to questions.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so if anyone has a question.
Oh, there's got to be a question.
Yeah, people are just being shy.
Hi. Hello.
Hey,
Can you hear me?
Stacy.
Hi. Congratulations. I read it in a day as soon as it came out. I have a funny question for you since we're on the Upper East Side. I didn't know that you like tutored, and I was wondering, I'm just so curious as a parent of 2 college students now, and given, the model minority myth that you're talking about, how did tutoring other kids in New York inform, how you think about things?
Yeah. Did I say that in my book? I guess so. Yeah. So I ran a pretty successful tutoring business on the Upper East Side when I was in my late 20s. Like I was working it. And it was like that's what I did when I was oh yes, I do remember I wrote that in the book, Stacy, thank you. I was doing that as I was training to be an artist. I was doing that on the side. That was sort of my weird side hustle. And I would say I think the main thing that I remember from that time period was just trying to feel proud that I was doing this thing that like a lot of my students they were uber wealthy. They weren't just like little wealth, they were like uber wealthy, like 4 houses and, had a plane wealthy. And I cared so much about them. But I knew I was also like just a servant kind of in their lives because they had so many people who were providing services in their lives. But I cared so much because I wanted them to be thinkers and scholars. And I don't know what I'm saying basically. Is just it was hard also to be in those homes because of class difference. Like I had gone to Princeton and Harvard Law School, Harvard Grad School, and I was there because I had this pedigree, but I also knew that, there was this like really distinct class difference between me and these other people who also wanted their kids to go to Harvard or Princeton, and I knew that did it even matter for them? I don't know. I don't have a good answer, Stacy, to that question, but I could write literally another whole memoir about all the antics that went down during those years that I was a tutor to like uber wealthy people. Yeah. Oh, sorry, Jay. I didn't mean to usurp your.
Hi, congratulations. I
Thank
haven't read
you.
your book, but I'm very eager to. My question is about as a memoir, and you do have family members here. What was that like with, I'm sure they're
Yes.
mentioned in your book.
Yes.
And so how was your family, what was their take on it while you're writing the book? Do they know you're writing this book?
Yeah.
And so how do they feel about it now?
My mom passed away, my sister, when the book came out. She read it and she said, I think Oma would have been very proud of you. And I think that was great to hear. My father's sitting 3 seats down from you. You can ask him yourself. But I think he has been, Dad, you've been very, very supportive of me, even though I'm sure it's hard for you. And I'm sure you are afraid about some things and proud about other things. It's, again, a both and situation. But the ethics of memoir, the ethics of writing about other people are really tricky. You know, of course, you're writing, but I think a lot, and I really believe this. When I was in art school, we all sat around, we painted the same person in the same room, in the same light, for the same time, in the same pose, and all the paintings were very different. Many people lived through the same experiences I did. 9/11, college education, my marriage, whatever. And my take on it is my take, you know? And so I think if there's some solace in that, it's that, like, your canvas of the same thing and my canvas of the same thing, it's just gonna look so different.
You also make yourself the villain pretty constantly in the book.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's like, wow, she's really hard on herself.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Emma. That's really nice of you to say.
It's okay. Next question.
Hi, Hyeseung. Congratulations. So I have a question about your relationship to artwork. So you talked about art being an oasis for you from productivity as self-worth.
Yes.
Did that relationship to productivity and self-worth ever find its way into your art making? And if so, how did you fix that for yourself? And if not, how are you able to keep that influence?
Hey, Adri. Yeah,
Hi.
it's a great question.
Thank you.
I think I understood it as, like, how is it that you are doing your art, which is like this pure thing, but like art is also a commercial thing? Is that sort of your question?
Close. So your book is about finding your self-worth as being something that exists regardless of external achievement. Art is something that is an external achievement inherently, right? It's the production of objects. So how are you able to keep that tendency to equate self-worth to productivity from becoming a factor in how you approached your art making?
Okay, I think what yeah. So when I say that, like, art making was an oasis, I'm not talking about, like, I'm talking about the practice of, like, being in the studio and making work. I'm 100% not talking about, like, whether or not my sketch sells, or, like, you know, I can get a show, or, you know, stuff like that. Like, to me, that's separate. And so when I get into the mindset of, like, art as commerce, then I think about productivity. But I'm also really kind to myself and understand that, like art sometimes takes 26 years, and, you know, I'm not patting myself on the back about that, but I just think about it in terms of, like, sometimes the work is going to have its own timeline, so I don't know if I'm answering your question, but hey, Bo.
Hi. My question is also about art making, and art making in the context of writing. So my question is, like, having lived all of these kind of different lives over the course of writing this book, did you always see yourself as a writer? Like, were you always writing continuously? Or, like, in 26 years of, like, tutoring, art making, going to law school, other things,
Yeah.
were there times when that wasn't a part of how you saw yourself?
I don't think of all the little things and the big things that I did in life as different lives. I think of it as, like, me trying to do the same one thing and just being bad at it. And all the time, yes, Bo, I was writing. You know, there's probably like 200,000 words that are, like, in the computer somewhere that I wrote that was part of this book, or maybe they'll make it to another book or something like that. But yeah, I think that was the issue with the first iteration of Docile, was like, it felt like, you know, when I was like saying da-dum, 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 it was like I was trying so hard different things, and it seemed like different distinct lives, but it wasn't. It was all funneled through the same, you know, line of like self-discovery and searching. So yeah.
Hey, Soon.
Hey, Lulu.
So my question is about how you were thinking when you first started this in your 20s. You know, your book, you read the last couple pages. There was sort of closure to it, and there was an ending. How did you see the ending when you first started in your 20s?
I didn't. I was just writing with a lot of curiosity about my family. And then, of course, that's curiosity about myself and how they imprinted on me. But I was really, there was no, when I'm 22, like thinking, you know, I'm throwing into the outfield or whatever, like understanding like where this ball is going. There was none of that. And I think it's better for art sometimes, or all the time. I mean, Diana, you're sitting right there, and I'm like thinking about you because I love having these conversations with you, of just you. There's a scent of something, and you just have to follow it and see where it goes. Yeah. So I didn't have a plan. There was no plan.
Hi.
Hi.
You had mentioned tonight, earlier, the three words that stood out to me. Chiaroscuro, you were talking about painting.
Yeah.
And then hypervigilance and assimilation. When I think about chiaroscuro, I'm thinking about things that both link together and separate. And so how does hypervigilance and assimilation exist in your mind? Are they separators? Are they form givers? Are they mutual excluders? You also talked about nuance, so these are not mutually exclusive ideas. Please take this away. Lean in. I'd like to hear how chiaroscuro and hypervigilance and assimilation rotate in your head.
Yeah. I like that you said about chiaroscuro, about like the light in chiaroscuro. This is this idea in art that you were really thinking about the difference between light and darkness. It's like two different metaphysical realms. I think with hypervigilance and assimilation, I was thinking also of that separation, that like with when I moved here as a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, I absolutely had to assimilate. Now, assimilation is different from like saying passing or feeling like you were completely American. Like assimilation was just like being in the culture that I wasn't part of and kind of traumatizing myself into submission. Like I was like this and had all of these spiky bits, and I was just kind of, you know, sawing and shaving off these spiky bits to be able to live in. And hypervigilance, watching, is to learn how to know that spiky bit can stay and this other spiky bit can't. So I think, I mean, I like how you were rapping about these three different terms that, you know, we threw out there, but that's really how I felt too, is that like assimilation is a process of traumatization, and hypervigilance is something that happens to us when we are not feeling safe in a situation.
Wrap up. So Emma, would you like to wrap it up for us with your last question?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we all could ask you 1,000 more questions, but we can do that after this. My last question is, hypothetically, if you were talking to a young Korean woman who is a lot like you in a lot of ways, okay, and maybe she's an artist too, right? What would you tell her? What advice would you give her? Hypothetically.
Just hypothetically?
Yeah.
Just take all your chances, every chance, and hope that you're the luckiest one in the room. Yeah, I think do everything and learn everything that you possibly want to. And don't seek approval from anyone. Don't be docile.
That's the name of the book.
Oh!
Well, Hyeseung, thank you so much for writing this and for sharing this with us. It's so beautiful and it's so, I hate to say fun, even though it's deeply sad sometimes. Yeah. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Emma.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much, everybody. Really happy to see you there.